Martin Luther King gave this speech, and he talked about the Pentagon being this huge demonic sucking tube that sucks out the lifeblood of things like housing, schools. Everybody's school budget is always, in the red, or, can't raise enough money. Gotta get rid of teachers or whomever. But
I think that's when they shot him, is when he said that. The race stuff was fine. That was no problem. But it was
that's true.
It is true. That was the end of his career.
He was assassinated a year to the day after he made that speech.
So a year to the day.
To the day.
April 4th, 1967, he must have given that speech. Amazing. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's one, the people in charge, I am convinced, would like Americans to hate each other on the basis of race. They don't want you to talk about the banks or the Pentagon.
I think that's really true.
I think it is true. Okay, so back to Ukraine. You said that there was an association of weapons manufacturers that were lobbying Congress to expand NATO. It seems a little bit crazy that weapons manufacturers would be allowed to dictate foreign policy because the conflict is so obvious.
Well, it's just money, so they're lobbying, they're giving political donations to the legislators, legalize bribery. And it's definitely a conflict of interest.
So that the pie, if I were to look at if you didn't tell me what country that was, and you said here's a country that spends more than half of its entire discretionary budget on weapons and troops, I would imagine a small country surrounded by enemies. I would not imagine a continental-sized country with independent resources, enough energy, enough food, doesn't really need anything, that's separated from the rest of the world by the two biggest oceans.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, actually.
No, it totally doesn't.
Has the U.S. been invaded before by a foreign army since 1812?
I don't think so.
No? No. Yeah. It's a little weird.
Yeah. I mean, and they keep on justifying these huge expenditures by coming up with enemy after enemy after enemy. So, first it was the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union collapsed. And, Gorbachev said at the time, "We will deny you of an enemy." And, I assumed that the Pentagon budget was going to, drop hugely because that was the whole justification for it. But what the Pentagon did was that they came up with what was called the two-war scenario. So now, instead of the Pentagon budget being structured to defeat the Soviet Union, now what they said is it needs to be structured to fight two medium-sized wars in two different places at the same time. And what do you know? That's going to cost just as much as we were spending on preparing to fight the Soviet Union.
Who are the wars going to be with?
Well, I think at the time there was the axis of evil. What was that? Iran, Iraq, North Korea, Cuba, probably another one.
The impulse that drives this is money, right? People want money. So you're an interesting person to ask since, you didn't grow up rich. You've had times when you were poor, then you got rich, selling the best ice cream there is. So you've kind of seen the money thing from both ends. Do you think that people put too much emphasis on money?
Well, part of what got me interested in this issue is that, you talk about these large numbers like 300 million, 500 million, a billion, 100 billion, 800 billion. Nobody has any idea what the size of that is. It's just like more money than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I have no perspective at all on that.
And so when Ben & Jerry's was sold, it had it came up to a level of $300 million in sales. And so I started having a feeling for how much money that is. And then I realized that 3 times that's about $1 billion. And so I vaguely got a handle on what quantity that is. And, $1 billion is an unfathomably large number. If you counted every second since you were born, you would be 32 years old before you'd lived 1 billion seconds. It is a lot of seconds. And that's just 1 billion. So the Pentagon budget is now $1 trillion. 1,000 billion.
Here's a fact of life you may not learn until you're older, but I'm going to tell you now. It's very hard to have a good time if you're wearing bad boots. In fact, it may be impossible, and that's why you need Tecovas. As a matter of fact, you don't just need them, you owe them to yourself. Tecovas makes Western boots for everybody, ranchers, real ranchers, lifelong cowboys, first-time boot buyers, and anyone in between. Every Tecovas boot is handcrafted, made by hand, with over 200 meticulous steps for a broken-in feel right out of the box. You don't have to compromise between looks and quality. You can have them both. Whether it's a long day or a big night, Tecovas are built to last and impressed. You wouldn't believe the compliments people here get when they wear them out, which they do. Right now, get 10% off at tecovas.com/Tucker when you sign up for email and text alerts. That's 10% off at Tecova, TECOVAS.com/Tucker.
In Pentagon speak, well, I don't know, it's a few aircraft carriers, it's another fighter jet, generation of fighter jets, whatever. But in regular speak, here's a good example. I wrote it down because I thought you might be asking. There was recently a fighter jet that fell off an aircraft carrier. So it was a $70 million fighter jet. So, that sounds kind of dramatic that, a $70 million fighter jet fell off an aircraft carrier. But if you think about the Pentagon budget as a box of Cheerios, that $70 billion would be 1/10 of one Cheerio, which is enough money, if you take it out of the Pentagon, to build 2 new hospitals in West Virginia. So what's crumbs to the Pentagon can really provide some real stuff that we need here in the U.S.
Why? I mean, so you're describing a system that basically can't be changed, because I don't know.
No, I'm in the process of changing it.
Okay. So you think that democratic levers still work in a non-democratic system?
Well, I think that the only lever that works is public opinion. So I'm in the process of starting up a campaign which is called Common Sense Defense. At the moment, we're going to get a flashier name later, but right now it's Common Sense Defense.
That's pretty flashy.
Thank you. Common Sense Defense. Yeah, be a nice change. And it is a campaign that's aimed just directly at the public. We're not trying to lobby Congress. We're not trying to influence that. We're trying to change public opinion in terms of what we want our government to be spending its money on, or at least not spending its money on excessive weapons. So Yeah, I believe that the thing that can change it, and and this is from my experience of my time going around lobbying on Congress on Capitol Hill about this issue. I think that's hopeless. I think all we can do is.
Well, you think it's hopeless to lobby the Congress?
Yeah. Hopeless for a guy who's not handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars.
What was your experience? You actually went to Washington and talked to them?
I went to Washington. I talked to those politicians. They smile and they say nice things and they take a picture and then they just vote and rubber stamp whatever Pentagon bill comes in because they don't want their opponent to call them weak on defense.
So there were none that you would trust?
I wouldn't say that. I think there's a guy, no, I wouldn't say there's none. I mean, I think there's, I don't know, 20, 30.
Yeah. Do you think that part of the problem with the Ukraine war was Trump was against it? And that made it hard for people who hated Trump to say, I'm against it too?
I wasn't, I don't really know about that. I mean, I wasn't conscious of that myself. I mean, I know that, I know that for some Democrats, anything that Trump supports, they don't.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of that as being an issue with related to the Ukraine war.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.